Hi, this is John Hope Bryant, founder, chairman, and chief executive officer of Operation Hope. And I'm standing here on the 156th anniversary of the Freedman's Bank that was chartered and signed into law by then President Abraham Lincoln, March 3rd, 1865, chartered to, quote, teach free slaves about money. That's right. The bank you never heard of before, the federal bank you never heard of before, was born on this day, March 3rd, 1865, 156 years ago, right after the Civil War, that was chartered to give you the new definition of freedom. Savings account, so you can direct your wealth. The opportunity to benefit from your land ownership. So 2 months before this, and thank you, Dr. Gates, Henry Louis Gates, and his work to bring to the forefront through his documentaries and his research, the work after the Civil War that reveals that 20 former enslaved African Americans, they weren't slaves, they were enslaved, ministers and educated men met in Savannah, Georgia, because Atlanta had been burned to the ground in the March to the Sea, the last big battle of the Civil War, where I sit right now, the moral capital of America. That's right, the moral capital of America, Atlanta, was the ground game for the last battle of the Civil War. And when they burned Atlanta to the ground and burned all the way to the sea, they marched all the way to the sea to break the spirit of the Confederacy so they would not fight again. But Savannah had been saved. So 20 former enslaved African Americans of self-determination, of education, and of foresight met with Secretary of War Stanton, I believe, and General Sherman, if I got this correct. And as a result of that, they were asked, what do you want after slavery? What do you want from us to help you and your families to be free? This is now January 1865. Do they want a welfare program? No. Do they want a handout program? No. Do they want a subsidy? No. They said, we want land. We want to do for ourselves. You see, that's not a black answer or a Latino answer or an Indian answer or a white answer. There were more poor whites, by the way, in America then and now than poor anybody else. Little known fact. This is why Dr. King had focused on the Poor People's Campaign of 1968, inspired by Dr. Marion Wright Edelman of the Children's Defense Fund, inspired by her, because she said the next movement, Martin, she said, is about money. Dr. King said, I'm here to redeem the soul of America from the triple evils of war, racism, and poverty. So he was pivoting from racism, from war to poverty in what he called the Poor People's Campaign, right alongside my personal hero, his lieutenant, my play father today, Ambassador Reverend Dr. Andrew J. Young. But Dr. King was struck down in April of 1968 with an assassin's bullet in Memphis, Tennessee, as he launched this campaign. But 100 years before that, January of 1865, something else special, unique, really tragic happened. April of 1865, same month as Dr. King's assassinated. Lincoln was assassinated. But let me hold on for a minute, because this narrative is so important, and each of you watching this need to take notes and understand your history. Because if you don't understand your history and where you're going, if you don't know where you came from, you don't know who you are, you won't know where you're going, and you're bound to either repeat it or have somebody repeat it for you. If you don't know who you are, somebody is destined to tell you who you are. Can I get an amen? So January 1865, Field Action 15 was signed, I believe, in Savannah, Georgia. There's a historical marker, and the building is still there in Savannah if you want to go see it, where these former slaves met with military leaders, and it was designed to set aside 400,000 acres from the eastern seaboard, from around North Carolina through South Carolina, through the Georgia coast, all the way down the beachfront property to what we call basically Miami, Florida. And while we love beachfront property today, back then it was the agrarian age. You made your money, your wealth, your income off of the land. So if you put your seeds in the ground, tomorrow you wake up, your crops in Jamaica, And even though that was really tough and not very fertile, we didn't complain about it. We took that land, 400,000 acres, about 18,000 plots of land. So 18,000 families basically got this land distributed to them in this, what I call a pilot program. Keep in mind, there are 4 million slaves, so this was not exactly a fresh start for most, or for even, or all, and maybe even not for most, but for some, it was symbolic. But these 400,000 acres was set aside. We worked that land. No Instagram, no Twitter, no Facebook, no social media, no telephone. Somehow folks got the memo, and 1,000 people, it is estimated, occupied this land and worked it so hard. Within a month's time, General Sherman said, "My God, they're so industrious. Give them a mule." That's like saying today, give a farmer a tractor. It was an investment in themselves, in their self-determination, because he saw how much they could add to the American experience once they were given what I call the 5 pillars of success from my book, Up From Nothing, where I talk about and unpack what it takes to be successful in the business plan that formerly enslaved were not given, along with Native American Indians and even my poor white friends who are different from their wealthy and educated white friends and their experience. That's another video for another time. But in some ways, what you're seeing today of the frustration of struggling blacks and browns and the frustration of poor whites with a high school education or less is in some ways a mirrored frustration of a lack of aspiration, a lack of industry, a lack of education, a lack of family structure, a lack of being taught the math, how money, wealth works, a lack of self-esteem and confidence, a lack of resiliency, a lack of successful role modeling and the proper environment. Because if you hang around 9 broke people, I guarantee you'll be the 10th. So now you have January, the land set aside. February, the mule, the tractor given, invested. And March 3rd came the Freedmen's Bureau, which created a range of community assets for formerly enslaved, including hospitals and educational institutions, et cetera. I believe land-grant universities came from that, but then you also had the bank, the Freedmen's Bank, created, by the way, by a black minister out of New York City as an original idea, moved from New York City to Washington, D.C., domiciled ultimately across the street from the White House and the Treasury Department. And by the way, on a location that was located right across from Treasury and was Treasury Annex building for 100 years. I'm getting ahead of myself. So Abraham Lincoln signed into law the Freedmen's Bank, chartered, as I said, to teach free slaves about money. And then he was killed the next month. So you want to know why blacks in this country have a net worth that's less than 10% of their white counterparts? You couldn't build investable income because you weren't paid for your labor. You were enslaved. You worked for free for 240 years. So the basic tenet of America, you work hard with these, you get the benefit of your labor. This is American, as they say, apple pie. We worked really hard as not dummies. We were geniuses of the land. We came from Africa. We knew land better and how to sort it and work it better than anybody else. We worked it longer than anybody else. And we were brought here because land in the southern states was best for the crops of that day, which was cotton and tobacco, et cetera. And we worked that land so hard, we built the first millionaires in America. That's right. And the wealthiest city in America in 1840 was Natchez, Mississippi. That's right, in the world in 1840. And they have not progressed since then because they've not upgraded their business plan to include all of us. But that's another story for another time. But the thought was, we have land now, we have industry, we have access to a bank, we're going to get education, and Lincoln was going to give us the right to vote, and he was assassinated. And Frederick Douglass, who you know to be an abolitionist, and I know to be a businessman, decided to run this bank after Lincoln was assassinated. He put $10,000 of his own money in that bank. He owned, by the way, property in Baltimore, Maryland. You can go see it as a marker on it as well. He was a real estate owner and rented it out to working class blacks. That gave him the financial freedom to be an abolitionist. And he put $10,000 of his own money in this bank to try to save it. It had $52 million of deposits of formerly enslaved. Look at this, right? These are Union soldiers who put their money in this bank, 73,000 depositors. And unfortunately, the bank failed after assassination of Lincoln. and the president that came after Lincoln, who was far from enlightened and pulled all the federal troops out of the South. This bank failed in 1874. It was an OCC bank, Office of the Comptroller of the Currency. I want to thank, by the way, the OCC, the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, and the FDIC, the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, and FDIC's chairwoman, who issued a statement today commending and commemorating the anniversary. Also, U.S. Senator Warnock plans to issue a statement, and I've sent notifications to all the other federal regulators in this regard, in hopes that they will also honor this incredible, really untold story and legacy. And if you fast forward, really, the story of the Freedman's Bank was actually never told again. It was ignored until Dr. King picked up that mantle, as I said, in 1968 with the Poor People's Campaign, where he was assassinated. He was assassinated the same month as Lincoln, 100 years later. And it's not that we're today living in some kind of a mysterious time where things don't make sense. Everything makes sense. That you have income and wealth inequality, that you had people who work for free as enslaved people who couldn't create capital because they were capital, couldn't take income and turn it into investment dollars that then turned into, or capital that then turned into investments, shall I say, so they could build wealth. And the story is much longer, but you can't grow a community without banks backing them, and you need to have capital flows supporting them. And even the federal government had its hand in discrimination in the 1930s when FHA would not insure mortgages in underserved neighborhoods. Not all the story is bad. Somehow we've excelled, exceeded. Black people have been doing so much with so little for so long. We can almost do anything with nothing. We've created Black billionaires in spite of, Black multimillionaires in spite of, successful engineers, doctors, lawyers, bankers, professionals, small business owners, and entrepreneurs in spite of, if not because of, and still we rise. But there's so much opportunity still left on the table. The Citigroup report recently issued show that discrimination against Blacks in the last 20 years alone cost America $16 trillion, that's with a T, in lost GDP, gross domestic product. And if we just knock it off, stop it right now, we'd add another $1 trillion a year in increased GDP. This is a story I'm selling now at Operation Hope. The story, the color is not white, black, red, brown, or yellow now. It's actually green in the United States, the color of U.S. currency, the color of shared aspiration opportunity, the color that's driving the 10th largest growth economy in the U.S., which is Atlanta, the largest economy in the South, which is Atlanta, the only international city in the South, which is Atlanta, which is decided to fight over who gets a contract, not who sits at a water fountain of the color green, not black or white. And it's not a fight. It's just about trying to figure out who's right enough to get the contract. So we realize that we're better together, and together we rise. And so now you have a lot of banks trying to, I think, honorably, including some Black fintech institutions and startups, trying to fill this gap, and CDFIs and others trying to fill this gap of the Freedman's Bank. You have Operation Hope trying to finish the unfinished work of financial coaching at scale with the mission of the Freedman's Bank. We just announced a deal with Delta Airlines just yesterday to help all 80,000 of their employees across the country. This is the unfinished work of civil rights movement, and we can all join together to celebrate this anniversary of this unfinished work, and to try to figure out what we can do to help the average person come up today. I want to give you some history on this incredibly untold story. You may or may not know that we also helped and worked with Secretary Jack Lew under the Obama administration, January 2016, to rename the Treasury Annex building the Freedman's Bank building. We're so honored by that. If you go on your phone now today and you type in the Freedman's Bank building, you'll see this glorious building that was the headquarters of the Freedman's Bank, that sits across the street from the Treasury Department and catty corner from the White House, so that Lincoln could see the most important unfinished experiment of his presidency and his unfinished business in America. It's social justice through an economic lens. I hope you found this helpful. Go to operationhope.org, freedmansbank.org to get more information on what we can do today to help honor and celebrate this unfinished work by doing more and giving more and leaning in, all of us today. And also sign up if you're Black aspiring individuals, sign up to 1MBB. Go to hope1mbb.org today to become a new business owner, as we've committed with Shopify $130 million to stand up 1 million new Black businesses over 10 years' time by 2030. This is the third Reconstruction. This is our time. Celebrating the 156th anniversary of the Freedman Bank. This is John Hope Bryant signing off. Thank you all very, very much.